A billionaire, a crying baby, and a teenager from Chicago meet on a flight. And nothing will ever be the same. Watch till the end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Richard Whittaker pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes, trying to will the pounding in his head to stop. It was useless. His 6-month-old daughter, Emma, was still shrieking at the top of her lungs, her tiny face red and contorted, her fists clenching and unclenching as if she were fighting the entire world. For nearly 3 hours, her relentless cries had filled the first-class cabin, rising above the hum of the engines, drowning out conversation, overpowering even the expensive noise-canceling headphones clamped to the ears of the passengers around him. Richard had tried everything. He had offered bottles, changed her diaper in the cramped lavatory until he was drenched in sweat, and paced the aisles, bouncing her in his arms the way he had seen his wife do countless times. He even tried holding his headphones against her ears, piping in Mozart's soft piano concertos as if the music could soothe what nothing else could. Nothing worked. Emma's cries only grew sharper, more desperate, until it seemed to Richard that every second stretched into an eternity. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted from polite endurance to outright hostility. In seat 1A, Harold Morrison, an elderly financier Richard knew from boardroom circles, was sighing theatrically and muttering to his wife, making sure his disapproval was heard. In 3B, socialite Victoria Sterling typed furiously on her phone, no doubt firing off complaints to her friends about the inconsiderate father ruining her transatlantic crossing. The flight attendants offered suggestions with tight professional smiles, but their eyes betrayed fatigue. Even the captain's neutral announcement about ensuring all passengers enjoy a comfortable flight carried an edge that Richard could not mistake. It was directed at him, and Richard, CEO of an $8 billion technology company, a man who could negotiate hostile takeovers and sway international markets, sat helpless with a screaming baby in his arms, realizing that none of his skills mattered in this moment. He could solve billion-dollar problems, but not this one. He looked down at Emma, his chest tightening. She wasn't just loud, she was miserable. Her eyes squeezed shut, her cheeks blotchy, her body stiff with discomfort. He whispered, "I'm sorry, sweetheart," feeling the sting of failure. His wife Sarah had warned him this trip would be harder than he thought. She was recovering from surgery, insisting he still fly to London for critical meetings, and now here he was, utterly unprepared for what taking the baby along really meant. Then, in the middle of the chaos, something unexpected happened. From beyond the curtain separating first class and economy, a figure emerged. A teenager, 16 maybe, walked hesitantly down the aisle. His clothes were worn but neat, his sneakers scuffed, his backpack patched with duct tape. His skin was dark, his frame lanky, his expression cautious yet determined. He carried himself with a seriousness that seemed older than his years. Passengers stared, puzzled. What was a kid from economy doing here? The flight attendant at the divider moved quickly to intercept him, suspicion plain in her eyes. But before she could, the boy spoke, his voice quiet but clear enough to cut through Emma's screams. "Sir," he said, looking directly at Richard, "may I try?" Richard blinked, so stunned by the offer that he didn't immediately respond. The boy gestured gently toward Emma, his hand steady, his eyes focused not on Richard but on the baby. Something in his tone, calm, respectful, utterly sincere, slipped past Richard's defenses. Exhausted and desperate, Richard nodded before he could think better of it. The teenager stepped forward. Without fuss, he slid his hands beneath Emma, lifting her with surprising confidence. He shifted her into a position Richard had never seen, supporting her head and torso with one arm while his other hand pressed lightly along her back in a slow, rhythmic pattern. At the same time, he began to hum a soft melody, a tune so unfamiliar and yet so soothing that it seemed to carry a weight of generations. And then, silence. It was instant, almost unbelievable. Emma's piercing wails faltered into whimpers, then faded into nothing. Her stiff body softened, her fists unclenched. Her eyes fluttered open, wide and wet, and then fixed on the boy's face. For the first time in hours, she looked calm, content even. She let out a tiny gurgle, as if relieved that someone had finally understood what she needed. The transformation was so sudden, so absolute, that the entire cabin froze. The sighs and mutters, the judgmental looks, all of it dissolved into stunned quiet. 200 passengers held their breath, watching as if a miracle had just unfolded before their eyes. Even Harold Morrison lowered his watch and leaned forward, his mouth slightly open. Victoria Sterling stopped typing mid-complaint. The flight attendants gathered, whispering in amazement. Richard stared, unable to comprehend. "How did you—" he whispered hoarsely. The boy gave a small smile without breaking his rhythm. "My baby sister had colic," he said simply. "Took me months to figure out what actually worked." Richard blinked. The explanation was so matter-of-fact, so modest, yet the evidence was undeniable. His daughter, asleep now in the arms of a teenager from economy. Richard's pulse slowed for the first time in hours. Relief washed through him, followed closely by awe. And then he noticed details he hadn't before. The boy's backpack, slung over one shoulder, was covered with mathematics competition patches, their bright colors stitched carefully into the fabric. A notebook poked from one side pocket, filled with what looked like dense equations and sketches of geometric shapes. The intelligence in his eyes was unmistakable. Calm, analytical, far beyond what Richard expected from a 16-year-old. "Who are you?" Richard asked, his voice filled with a mix of wonder and curiosity. The boy met his gaze steadily, with a maturity that was startling. "My name is Noah Simon. I'm 16, from Southside Chicago. I'm on my way to London to compete in the International Mathematics Competition Championship." For a moment, Richard forgot the exhaustion, the embarrassment, even the judgment of the people around him. All he could do was look at this teenager who had not only calmed his daughter when no one else could, but had done it with a confidence and grace that suggested there was far more to his story than met the eye. Around them, the cabin slowly relaxed, passengers exchanging looks of disbelief that shifted into admiration. A man who had grumbled minutes earlier now whispered, "Remarkable." Even the flight attendants smiled, visibly relieved. But Richard's thoughts were elsewhere. He was realizing that what had just happened wasn't merely a reprieve from a screaming baby. It was the beginning of something much larger. He didn't know it yet, but the chance encounter with Noah Simon at 35,000 feet would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about wealth, genius, and the true meaning of help. For now, though, he simply watched his daughter sleep peacefully in the arms of a stranger, a boy whose compassion and skill had turned 3 hours of misery into one unforgettable moment of silence. And in that silence, Richard felt the world shift. The limousine's tinted windows reflected the neon blur of London's night. Noah Simon sat stiffly against the leather seat, his patched backpack wedged between his sneakers. Across from him, Richard Whittaker cradled baby Emma, who dozed peacefully, her tiny breaths rising and falling against his tailored suit. For Noah, the contrast was dizzying. First cramped economy, now riding through the city in a car that looked more like a moving office than transportation. Richard watched Noah from the corner of his eye. The boy's expression was guarded, his hands folded tightly in his lap, as if afraid of leaving fingerprints on the polished armrest. Richard recognized that look. He had worn it himself years ago when he was a scholarship student trying to hide the fact that he'd grown up with nothing. He cleared his throat. "You handled Emma like you'd done it 1,000 times," Richard said. His voice was casual, but his eyes searched Noah's face. "I have," Noah replied. "My little sister Maya had colic. Nights were rough. My mom worked double shifts. My grandmother tried to help, but most of the time it was me. I didn't really have a choice." Richard nodded slowly. This wasn't the kind of experience you picked up from a parenting manual. It was survival, born of necessity. And here was this boy who had turned desperation into skill. "South Side, you said?" Richard asked. "Yes, sir." Noah looked out the window, his reflection half shadowed by the city lights. "Chicago, not the best neighborhood, but it's home." The car pulled up to the Langham Hotel, its grand facade glowing in golden light. Uniformed staff hurried to open doors. Noah stepped out cautiously, his sneakers squeaking against marble steps polished to perfection. The lobby was even more overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, velvet chairs that looked too expensive to sit on. Noah swallowed hard. He had never set foot in a place like this. The manager greeted Richard by name. "Welcome back, Mr. Whitaker. Your suite is ready, and the adjoining room you requested as well." Adjoining room? Noah blinked. He hadn't expected that. Upstairs, Richard showed him to a suite larger than Noah's entire apartment back in Chicago. Through a private door was Noah's room. King-sized bed, floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Hyde Park, bathroom gleaming with gold fixtures. He set his backpack gingerly on the floor, almost afraid it would scuff the carpet. Richard appeared in the doorway, holding Emma against his shoulder. "You'll have privacy here. Room service is 24 hours. Anything you need, just ask." Noah turned uneasy. "Mr. Whitaker, this is too much. I don't belong in a place like this." Richard studied him carefully, then shook his head. "Don't ever say that. You belong anywhere your abilities take you, remember that." Noah didn't answer. The weight of the room pressed against him, both gift and burden. The next morning, the three of them ate breakfast in Richard's suite. Emma sat in a high chair, banging a spoon against the tray while Noah sipped orange juice and tried to memorize the day's schedule. "I'll be tied up from 10 to 4, Richard explained. "Board meetings, investor calls, contract signings. Emma usually naps from 1 to 3. That's your free time to study." Noah nodded. "The opening ceremony is at 6. I'll be there." Richard smiled faintly. "Good. And Noah, your competition is the priority. I meant what I said on the plane. You help with Emma when you can, but your focus is mathematics. Deal?" "Deal," Noah said softly. By late afternoon, the Royal Institution was buzzing with young prodigies from 60 countries. Noah stood among them, his patched backpack slung over his shoulder, his sneakers squeaking against polished floors. Around him, students wore tailored suits, carried state-of-the-art laptops, spoke in multiple languages with ease. Some had entourages, teachers, parents, coaches. Noah had no one. He tried to steady his breathing as he took a seat in the vast auditorium beneath portraits of scientists who had shaped the modern world. Isaac Newton, Michael Faraday. Their eyes seemed to watch him, silently asking what a boy from Southside Chicago was doing here. The director of the competition, Dr. Margaret Thompson, stepped onto the stage. "Welcome to the International Mathematics Competition Championship. You are the future of mathematics, innovation, and discovery. Over the next 3 days, you will face challenges designed not only to test your computational skills, but also your creativity, logic, and resilience under pressure." The words sent a shiver down Noah's spine. He glanced around. Students scribbled in notebooks already, whispering strategies to teammates. One boy in an expensive blazer sneered openly at Noah's duct-taped backpack. "Guess they'll let anyone in now," he muttered to his friend. Noah's ears burned, but he didn't respond. Instead, he remembered Emma's wide eyes focusing on him the night before, her cries fading into silence. He remembered his grandmother's voice telling him, "You don't need to prove where you're from, only who you are." The ceremony ended with polite applause. As the crowd filed out, Noah stayed behind a moment longer, gripping the strap of his backpack like a lifeline. Tomorrow, the real test would begin, the individual round. His hands trembled slightly, but his jaw set. Whatever sneers or doubts followed him, he knew one thing: he had earned his place here. And he would prove it, not with words, but with numbers. Outside, a sleek car waited. Richard stood by the door, Emma cradled against his chest, watching Noah emerge from the grand stone building. He saw the tension in the boy's shoulders, the weight of expectation. "Big day tomorrow," Richard said as Noah slid into the car. "Yeah," Noah whispered. He didn't say more. As the car drove back through London's evening streets, Noah pressed his forehead to the glass, the city lights blurring into streaks. His mind replayed the sneer, the whispered insult, the weight of eyes judging him before he had even solved a single problem. But beneath the fear, another thought flickered like a spark. Emma's laugh when he had made shapes with her toys that morning. A baby who trusted him, a billionaire who believed in him, a grandmother who had raised him to fight for every inch. Tomorrow he would show them all. And as Big Ben's chimes echoed across the city, Noah clenched his fists in his lap, ready for the battle of numbers that lay ahead. The morning of the first round dawned gray over London, rain streaking the tall windows of the Langham Hotel. Noah woke before his alarm, staring at the ornate ceiling of his room. His chest felt tight. Today was the first real test. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, and glanced at his patched backpack resting on the chair. Inside were pencils, a cheap calculator, and the notebook filled with his scribbles. It was all he had brought, and it felt almost laughably small compared to the resources other competitors carried. Across the hall, Emma's cries filtered through the connecting door, sharp but familiar. Noah rose quickly, pulled on his hoodie, and knocked once before stepping into Richard's suite. The billionaire was pacing with the baby in his arms, his tie already loosened from the struggle of the morning routine. "She won't take the bottle," Richard admitted, frustration and helplessness flashing across his face. Noah reached out his arms. "Here, let me." Emma settled almost instantly against him, her cries softening into hiccups. He adjusted her posture, pressed gently along her spine, and began humming the tune his grandmother had passed down. Within minutes, the storm had passed. Richard exhaled, shoulders sagging with relief. "You have a gift," Richard said quietly. Noah shook his head. "Not a gift. Practice. When you have no other choice, you figure things out." He kissed Emma's forehead, then passed her back. "She's good now, and I need to head to the competition." Richard adjusted the baby carefully. "Go. We'll be fine. Remember, this is your time. Focus." The competition hall buzzed with nervous energy. Desks were arranged in neat rows beneath a vaulted ceiling, each place set with test booklets and number tags. Judges in dark suits circulated with clipboards. Noah slid into his seat, the only sound in his ears the thud of his heartbeat. He opened the booklet when the signal was given. The first problem was number theory, a puzzle about modular arithmetic and prime sequences. Relief surged through him. This was his territory. He scribbled quickly, filling lines with calculations, feeling the rhythm of logic settle his nerves. Each solution led neatly into the next, patterns unfolding before him like a map only he could read. As the hours passed, the problems grew more complex. Probability models for genetic inheritance, a geometry proof involving multidimensional space, an optimization question about telecommunications networks. Noah's pencil flew, his mind leaping between ideas, weaving connections. When time was called, he leaned back, exhausted but confident. He had done more than survive. He had thrived. That evening, Emma sat on the carpet of Richard's suite, clapping blocks together. Noah knelt beside her, lining the pieces into patterns. 2 red, 4 blue, 6 yellow. "What comes next, Emma?" he asked softly. She squealed, reaching for the green ones. Noah laughed. "That's right. 8 green." Richard watched from the table where he had spread his papers, unable to keep a smile from tugging at his lips. "You're teaching her math already?" "Patterns are everywhere," Noah said, adjusting the blocks into a sequence. "She sees it before she can explain it. It helps me think, too. Going back to basics keeps my mind sharp." Richard leaned forward. "You sound like a teacher as much as a competitor." Noah shrugged. "Maybe one day, if I can." The second day brought the team round. Noah was placed with 3 others: Kenji from Japan, Maria from Brazil, and Klaus from Germany. Their first challenge flashed on the screen: design an algorithm to optimize city traffic flow. Kenji immediately launched into equations, chalking symbols onto the board. Klaus countered with a geometric model. Maria suggested probability weighting. Noah listened, then raised his hand. "You're modeling the cars as if they were perfect particles. But people don't drive like equations," he said. "Where I'm from, traffic depends on weather, rush hour, even how fast someone decides to take a yellow light. If we don't add variables for behavior, the model won't work in the real world." The room fell silent. Then Maria's eyes lit up. "Yes, human unpredictability. That's what we missed." Kenji frowned, then nodded slowly. "You're right. We must adjust for irregularity." By the end of the session, their team's solution was more robust than any of them could have built alone. The judges praised its practicality, noting Noah's contribution specifically. For the first time, Noah felt not like an outsider, but like a leader among equals. That night, Richard returned late from negotiations to find Noah sitting cross-legged on the floor, Emma asleep beside him in her bassinet. The boy looked up, exhaustion etched into his face, but a quiet fire in his eyes. "How did it go?" Richard asked. "We scored in the top 3 today," Noah replied. His voice was steady, but pride flickered beneath it. "The judges said our solution stood out for realism." Richard nodded. "Not surprising. You see connections others miss." He hesitated, then sat down across from Noah. "I've been thinking, my company has the resources to build something new. A division that uses artificial intelligence and mathematical modeling to tackle social problems. Education gaps, healthcare access, economic growth in neighborhoods like the one you come from. You'd be perfect for it." Noah blinked, stunned. "Me? I'm 16. I haven't even started college." "Exactly," Richard said, "which is why we'd invest in your education, undergrad, graduate, whatever it takes. In exchange, you'd bring your mind, your experience, and your heart back into the work when you're ready." Noah looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully, her tiny hand curled around the edge of a blanket. He felt the weight of possibility pressing against him. It was more than money, more than opportunity. It was a chance to prove that numbers could change lives, not just on paper, but in the streets where he had grown up. And for the first time since boarding the plane, He began to believe that his future might stretch far beyond what he had ever dared to imagine. The headlines broke faster than either of them expected. By mid-morning, Noah's face was already circulating online. A passenger from the flight had snapped a discreet photo of him holding Emma, the billionaire's baby, finally at peace after hours of wailing. The caption read, "Teen from economy calms billionaire's baby when no one else could." Within hours, it spread across social media, picked up by news blogs eager for a feel-good story. But in the comment sections, admiration mixed with venom. "Heartwarming," wrote one user. "Clearly staged," sneered another. "Kids angling for a scholarship handout." "Figures the billionaire can't handle his own child." Richard sat at the breakfast table in the hotel suite, scrolling through the comments, jaw tightening. Emma babbled in her high chair, tossing cereal puffs onto the floor. Noah stood near the window, arms crossed, staring out at Hyde Park with a storm brewing in his chest. He finally spoke. "They're saying I don't deserve to be here, that I'm some charity case riding your coattails." Richard set down his phone. "People will always talk, especially when they don't understand what they're seeing." Noah turned sharply. "But it matters to me. Back home, my whole neighborhood scraped together money for this trip. My mom works herself to exhaustion so I could compete. And now everyone thinks I'm here because you pulled strings." His voice cracked, anger layered with fear. "I can't be someone's charity project." Richard leaned forward. "You're not. Don't confuse opportunity with pity. There's a difference." Noah clenched his fists, his reflection in the glass showing the tightness in his jaw. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes. Later that morning, Noah sat on the floor with Emma while Richard prepared for another round of negotiations. The baby fussed, twisting in her blanket, her cries threatening to rise. Richard froze, papers in hand. Noah moved instinctively, lifting her into the crook of his arm, humming the same lullaby. Emma calmed, her wide eyes locking onto him as if she recognized his voice above all else. Richard watched, torn between gratitude and guilt. He knew the world would label this boy a miracle babysitter while overlooking the brilliance that truly defined him. He cleared his throat. "Noah, what happened on that plane was more than calming a baby. It showed who you are under pressure, someone who acts when others hesitate. That's character, not charity." Noah rocked Emma gently. "Character doesn't pay tuition." Richard smiled faintly. "No, but sometimes it earns you allies who can." The afternoon competition was even more grueling than the day before. Teams were presented with complex modeling scenarios, problems designed to test not only mathematics, but leadership and innovation. Noah's group was assigned a case involving epidemic spread in a metropolitan region, a challenge that struck uncomfortably close to his own lived experience of overcrowded clinics and limited healthcare access in Chicago. As his teammates debated purely theoretical models, Noah interjected, "You're forgetting human factors. People don't always follow protocols. They panic, they hide symptoms, they travel when they shouldn't. If our model ignores behavior, it won't predict reality." At first, Klaus dismissed him. "This is mathematics, not sociology." But as Noah laid out examples, families in his neighborhood who delayed treatment because they couldn't afford it, crowded apartments where one illness spread to 10, the team realized he was right. They adjusted their equations, waiting for human behavior and compliance variability. The judges took note, scribbling furiously on their pads. Afterward, Maria clapped him on the shoulder. "Without your perspective, our solution would have collapsed. You see things we miss." Noah flushed with pride, though doubt still whispered inside him. Was he being valued for his mind or for the novelty of his background? That evening, the hotel suite was unusually quiet. Emma slept peacefully, a soft rise and fall beneath her blanket. Richard poured sparkling water into 2 glasses and sat across from Noah at the dining table. "I saw how you led your team today," Richard said. "That's not just talent, that's vision, which is why I need to ask you something serious." Noah tensed. "What is it?" Richard leaned forward. "My company is considering a new division, artificial intelligence applied to social challenges, education inequality, healthcare accessibility, issues that have plagued communities like yours. You could be part of that. I don't mean tomorrow, but after you finish school, we'd cover everything, your education, mentorship, research funding. In return, you'd commit to building solutions that matter." Noah blinked, his throat tightening. It was everything he had ever dreamed of, yet also terrifying. "Why me? There are 100 kids here smarter than I am." Richard shook his head. "Maybe smarter on paper, but they don't have what you have. You see equations in real lives. You solve problems with empathy. That combination is rare." Noah lowered his gaze to his hands. "And what if people say I only got here because of you?" "Then you prove them wrong," Richard answered firmly. "Every day with your work, with your results. That's what I had to do. That's what you can do." Later, alone in his room, Noah lay awake staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed with a video call. He answered quickly, his mother's tired face filling the screen. "Baby, we saw the news," Lisa said, her voice hoarse from another double shift. "Everyone's talking about you." "I don't like it," Noah admitted. "People think I'm just some pity story." Lisa shook her head. "Let them talk. You're here because of your mind, not anyone else's. Don't forget that. And if Mr. Whitaker offers you a chance, take it. Opportunities like this don't come twice." From behind her, Grandma Rosa's voice chimed in. "Don't let pride close doors that God's opening." Noah swallowed hard. I don't want to lose myself." "You won't," Lisa said softly, "as long as you remember where you come from." Noah nodded, his chest aching with the weight of it all. After the call ended, he sat at the window overlooking the glowing city, the hum of London alive beneath him. Tomorrow was the final day. The hardest test awaited, not just of mathematics, but of identity, pride, and the price of opportunity. He whispered into the night, almost to himself, "I have to win, not just for me, for all of us." And in the quiet, he felt both the fear of being consumed by someone else's world and the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could change it instead. Rain tapped the tall windows of the lecture theater like a metronome counting down to judgment. The final round had a different gravity from the others. A single, open-ended problem, solved in private preparation rooms and then defended at the board before a panel of judges and an auditorium of peers. No teammates, no second chances. Solve, explain, persuade. Noah stood in the wings clutching his notebook, the paper soft from use. On stage, a competitor from South Korea finished a brilliant exposition on stochastic processes and vaccination thresholds. Applause rolled across the hall. Backstage, the usher lifted 2 fingers. 2 minutes. Noah closed his eyes. He could hear his grandmother's voice in the lullaby he'd hummed for Emma. He could hear the hostile comments online. He could hear the steady breath of a baby who trusted him without needing a resume. He opened his eyes, steadied his hands, and stepped into the light. The problem statement glowed on the large screen. Develop a mathematical framework to predict and mitigate the spread of an infectious disease in a dense urban region given incomplete data, variable human compliance, and resource constraints. 20 words, a lifetime of implications. "Good afternoon," he began, chalk in hand. The board looked impossibly wide. My framework combines network theory, probabilistic inference, and behavioral parameters to produce interventions that are both effective and feasible. He drew a city as a graph. Nodes for neighborhoods, weighted edges for mobility between them, buses, trains, commuting patterns. This is a multi-layer network, he said, tapping 3 stacked diagrams: physical proximity, transportation flow, and household clustering. Infection doesn't move evenly. It rides the lines people actually use. He layered in incomplete data. We don't know all infections, he said, so I use a Bayesian update step. Posterior estimates refine as partial signals arrive. Clinic reports, school absence spikes, wastewater sampling. He wrote the update rule cleanly, the symbols flowing without hesitation. Underreporting is a parameter, not a surprise. The model learns it. Then he drew a small, uneven curve. The crucial piece is human behavior. People don't obey guidelines like equations. Some isolate, some don't. Some mask, some can't. Some mistrust systems. So I incorporate compliance as a distribution, not a constant, varying by neighborhood, income, housing density, and trust. He sketched a simple logistic function that responded to messaging intensity and community leadership activation: churches, barbershops, local clinics. Where trust is high, low-cost measures travel farther. Where trust is low, we need different levers. A judge raised a hand. Your compliance parameters, are they measurable or hypothetical? Measurable by proxies, Noah answered. Vaccination uptake in past campaigns, attendance in community events, survey data, even foot traffic patterns from public transit. But when data are missing, the model treats compliance priors explicitly and updates them as outcomes come in. He moved to intervention. Given this, I cast mitigation as a constrained optimization. Maximize reduction in expected infections over a rolling horizon, subject to budget and staffing limits. He wrote the objective concisely. Then the constraints: limited nurses, limited tests, limited mobile clinics. It's not about the perfect plan. It's about the best plan you can actually run. He turned from the math to an example. Consider 2 adjacent neighborhoods. Same population. One has multi-generational apartments and a trusted church network. The other has high crowding and low institutional trust. The same message won't work. The model suggests shifting resources: more door-to-door testing in the second, community-hosted vaccination drives in the first, and synchronized bus scheduling to avoid peak crowding. He pointed back to the mobility layer. Reduce edges when possible, reinforce protective nodes when you can't. Another judge leaned forward. Why should we believe this does better than standard SEER models tuned to observed data? Because CIR assumes uniform mixing and homogeneous response, Noah said. Cities aren't homogeneous. And if you fit a model to yesterday's averages, you miss tomorrow's spikes. This framework predicts where a small change, one church service, one crowded bus line, creates a superspreader effect. Then it prescribes interventions that are realistic for the exact capacities on hand. It's predictive and prescriptive. He could feel the room tighten into attention. He breathed once, steadying his voice. Where I'm from, he added, one sick person in a crowded apartment can mean 10 sick by the weekend. If we don't model the reality people live in, our equations won't help them. Silence, and then a flurry of questions about identifiability of parameters with sparse signals, about robustness when compliance drops after fatigue, about fairness. Did the optimizer neglect quiet neighborhoods in favor of flashy wins? Noah answered each calmly. Identifiability. Use hierarchical priors. Tie parameters across similar neighborhoods. Fatigue. Include a decay term for adherence and schedule rest windows into policy to maintain long-run compliance. fairness. Add equity constraints so no neighborhood exceeds a maximum burden or minimum service level. Optimization shouldn't trade away dignity, he said. That's a constraint, not an afterthought. He ended with a short simulation, a few chalked curves, infection trajectories bending under targeted actions. Not a slick animation, just clean mathematics and a line that turned downward when the work was done. This is how a city breathes again, he said softly and put the chalk down. The applause started at the back, scattered at first, then gathering, then filling the hall. He stepped away from the board, ears ringing, hands finally trembling now that they were empty. At the edge of the crowd, he saw Richard standing with Emma against his shoulder, her tiny hand patting at his tie as if applauding too. Backstage, Noah exhaled shakily. Maria from his team found him first, eyes shining. "That was beautiful," she said. "Mathematics with a heart." Kenji bowed, small and sincere. "You balanced theory and life," he said. "Hard to do." Even Klaus, precise and reserved, offered a crisp nod. "Strong work." Noah smiled, grateful, but he didn't let himself hope too far ahead. Results were hours away. He sat on a bench in the quiet corridor and opened his notebook to a blank page, letting his pencil drift into patterns, grids, arcs, the small private geography of thought. He wrote home in the corner and boxed it twice. The auditorium's lights dimmed for the closing ceremony, the banners of 60 countries hanging above like a canopy of possibility. Dr. Margaret Thompson strode to the lectern, her voice carrying with the easy authority of someone who loved this gathering of minds. She spoke of creativity under pressure and of problems that refused easy answers. She thanked the volunteers and the judges and the city that had hosted them. In third place, she said at last, representing Germany, Klaus Müller. Applause, a handshake, a photo. In second place, representing South Korea, Park Min-jun. More applause, another handshake, another photo. Noah's palms went damp. He stared at the wood grain of the armrest and counted 4 knots in a neat diagonal. He told himself he would be fine with nothing. He told himself he'd already won the piece he needed, the certainty that he belonged. And, in first place, Dr. Thompson continued, voice lifting, representing the United States, Noah Simon, Chicago, Illinois. For a heartbeat, the hall seemed to tilt. Then sound crashed over him, cheers, whistles, the thunder of feet. He stood, barely remembering how, and made his way down the aisle. The stage looked impossibly high, the steps too many. Dr. Thompson's hand was warm, the trophy heavier than it looked, the certificate crisp with promise, a full scholarship, living expenses, research opportunities. "Noah," she said into the microphone, "your work impressed the judges not only for its rigor, but for its humanity. You reminded us that mathematics is a tool we wield for people, not just for papers." He found Richard in the crowd as flashes popped. The CEO's grin looked almost boyish. Emma waved her fist in the air, and Noah laughed out loud, an unguarded, astonished sound that belonged to a kid who had just learned the world could make room for him. They celebrated quietly. No champagne, just sparkling cider in tall glasses and room service burgers that tasted better than anything Noah could remember. Emma sat in a high chair, tearing the corner off a napkin with solemn concentration. The trophy stood on the table between them, reflecting city lights. Richard raised his glass. "To hard problems," he said, "and to the people who don't flinch when they see them." They touched rims. Noah set his glass down carefully. "I don't know how to say thank you in a way that matches what this is," he admitted. "Everything you've offered. It's bigger than a scholarship." Richard folded his hands, the executive posture of a man who made offers for a living and knew the weight they carried. "I meant what I said last night," he said. Whitaker Foundation will support you through college, tuition, housing, whatever you need to focus. After that, if you want it, there's a place for you at Whitaker Technologies. Help me build a division that applies AI and mathematical modeling to the problems you just solved on that board. Education, healthcare, city systems, real stakes, real lives. Noah looked at his hands, then up again. On one condition. Richard arched an eyebrow, amused. Negotiating already. Good. The first pilot, Noah said steadily. We run it on the south side, my neighborhood. We partner with the clinics and churches and schools that are already doing the work. We listen first. We design with them, not for them. Richard didn't hesitate. Done, he said. Design with, not for. South side first. Noah felt something loosen in his chest, a knot untied. Then yes, he said, voice low, I want this, but on that path. Richard leaned back, satisfied. On that path, he echoed, you'll lead it one day. Emma squealed then, punctuating the agreement as if she understood. Noah reached across the table and she grabbed his finger with fierce, sticky determination. He laughed again, the sound bright and unafraid. They talked logistics until the city turned late. Application steps, visa paperwork for research exchanges, the order in which life could become possible. When Noah finally drifted to the window, London glittered below like a promise laid out in small electric stars. He called home. Lisa's face appeared soft with pride, the exhaustion in her eyes glowing into something gentler. Rosa leaned in from the side of the frame, already crying and waving a dish towel like a flag. You did it, his mother whispered. We did it, Noah said, all of us. Come home, Rosa demanded, mock stern between happy tears. Your city wants to see that trophy. He smiled. I'm bringing more than the trophy, he said. I'm bringing a plan. Heathrow at dawn felt cleaner than airports had any right to feel, hushed and full of new beginnings. They boarded quietly, Richard with practiced ease, Noah with a kind of reverence, as if each step acknowledged the difference between arriving and departing as not quite the same person. Emma fussed at the jetway, then settled once they were seated, her head heavy against Richard's shoulder. The plane lifted into gray, through cloud, into sudden sunlight, a white field stretching forever beneath them. London slipped away at their backs. The Atlantic opened like a long equation. Unknowns, constraints, a destination you only reach by trusting the steps. Richard angled his body so Emma could reach for Noah. She grabbed two of his fingers this time and wouldn't let go. He didn't try to pull free. He let the connection anchor him, across rows, across worlds. Chicago first, Richard said, turning his head. Then Cambridge visits to meet mentors. We'll sequence it with your school counselor. One step at a time. One step at a time, Noah repeated. But forward. They fell into a quiet that wasn't empty. Noah pulled out his notebook and wrote a title on a fresh page. Southside Pilot, Draft 0. Under it, he sketched the 3 layers of his model, then circled the word trust and drew arrows to everything else. Build with, not for. Measure what matters. Optimize without forgetting people. Rules didn't feel like constraints anymore. They felt like guardrails. He looked up and caught Richard watching him with an expression that mixed pride and relief, and something like gratitude. It struck Noah that mentorship wasn't a one-way gift. It was an exchange. Belief for belief, promise for promise. Outside, the sky held steady. Inside, Emma's breathing synced to the engine's hum. Noah closed his eyes for a moment, letting the whole story replay. The wailing in first class, the hush after a lullaby, a board full of chalk, a crowd on its feet, a deal sealed not in a contract but in the way two people agreed to aim their work. When he opened them, The future didn't feel abstract anymore. It felt scheduled. The flight attendant paused beside their row, smiling down at the baby's small grip on Noah's hand. "Quite the partnership," she murmured. "Quite the problem solver," Richard said, nodding toward Noah. Noah shook his head, not in refusal, but in correction. "Quite the team," he said. He turned back to his notebook, drew a final box at the bottom of the page, and wrote one last line, a proof he could live by. Start with the smallest act that helps. Let the math and the world follow. The cabin settled into its airborne calm, engines thrumming like a long, low chord. The same seat, the same cabin, the same sky as days before, and none of it the same at all. The first evidence of a new equation for the future had been the hush in first class. What would you do in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss a new story.